So the beauty of space holding is that it is transformational. It allows people to complete with an emotional process or to resolve emotional overwhelm that allows them to move into what's next. So it's exciting and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. Hi, I'm Tina Berger and welcome to my channel. I'm the author of Coming Around Surprises and Surrender on the Path to Inspiration. One of the concepts that comes up a lot in my book is the idea of something called space holding space. And it feels like that's a good one to tackle and talk about a little bit. So there's a bias in our culture towards positive emotions and against expressing what we consider to be negative emotions. What I mean is we prefer happiness to sadness, joy and kind of getting up and getting on with things than kind of going down into our sadness or our grief. We certainly don't want to see anger expressed. So those emotions are natural human expressions and they arise in certain very normal situations. So what this means is when we have a bias against the expression of those emotions, that we end up being rewarded culturally for not expressing them. So people, for example, who respond to a death of a loved one or an illness by quickly recovering and getting back to work and getting back to the things that they need to do to take care of house and family and kind of standard life and work. Those people are really championed. And people who stay sad for a while and sometimes get debilitated for some period of time by grief or sadness are often kind of encouraged to get back to normal. And so what this means is we distance ourselves from our negative emotions, we disassociate from them or stuff them down or find some place to put them such that they're not expressed. And that can get stuck. It gets stuck in the body. It can manifest as illness. It can certainly manifest as a much smaller experience of our human expression and our life. So ideally, our emotions would be able to move through us, not become stuck. And the concept of space holding was for me very revolutionary when I first heard it, and it took me a little bit of time to understand what it meant. It's actually a different way of being with, and it's a conscious way of holding open, receptive space that is safe for people to be with you in so that they can process and move through emotions. So especially sadness or grief or anger. And there's a certain quality of that space that's really different from the normal way that we interact with each other. So it's an intentional way of being that has certain qualities about it. In my last video, when I talked about deep listening and deep communication in the process of counsel practice, I said we have a tendency to want to comfort people when they are going through something difficult. And sometimes that can feel like pressure for that person to come out of or press down or move away from those sad feelings or those emotions that they happen to be expressing in the moment. So there's a way that emotional space holding, that holding space for somebody is curious about the feelings. It holds an open container for those feelings. It allows people to express sadness in your midst without you feeling like you need to advise them. So there's a lack of judgment. There's a non-judgmental quality. There's also a non-expert quality about it. So if you're going through a sadness due to a death, for example, I don't bring my expertise into that space if I'm holding space for someone. I don't say, oh, I lost a person a few years ago and here's what I did. I went through an illness like that many years ago and here's how I processed it. Here's how I held it. There's no expertise brought in. So there's this open quality, this open container. There's a lack of judgment. There's a lot of space for silence if it's needed. I want to say one thing particularly about anger. There's a difference between anger and aggression. Anger is a normal human emotion and we all have it, and it usually is an indication that we're at a limit in some way, that our emotions, our body, our being is telling us there's something here that needs to change, that needs to stop. But sometimes we need to vent that anger in order to move on to resolving whatever the situation is or was that we're holding. And so as long as you are not being targeted by that anger, then it's okay. The more we can hold space for people's angry expression, and the more we as people who become angry can learn that we can express anger without pointing it at anyone. We can just vent it out. We can just claim it and own it as our anger that's moving through us without becoming aggressive, without becoming abusive with it. So that's a super, super valuable thing to do for someone. So let's talk about the qualities of space holding for a minute. So there's this way of being with another person who is processing maybe emotional overwhelm, maybe some anger, maybe some sad feelings or some grief, is going through a hard time. And there is an invitation here. I'm asking you, I'm inviting you, I'm curious, I'm safe. Holding space is an intentional way of being with someone that holds a kind of an open container, a receptivity. So qualities of space holding: openness, compassion, lack of judgment, lack of expertise, allowing, deep listening, a very loving and open receptive container, and intentionality. So there's an intentionality about it. So the beauty of space holding is that it is transformational. It allows people to complete with an emotional process or to resolve emotional overwhelm that allows them to move on, to resolve, to come to the end of, and to move into what's next. So it's exciting, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And I've been on both sides of that experience as someone who's really needed someone to be a safe, emotional space for me, but also it's beautiful on the other side too. So in this way, holding space has the ability to open deep space between people, but it also deepens compassion and it recalibrates us. There's no way for us to turn off one end of our emotional spectrum that we consider to be unpleasant and not also contract on the upside. So when we reduce our capacity for experiencing sadness or grief or anger, we're also reducing our capacity for our experience of love and happiness and joy. And this is a very mysterious territory. So holding space allows you to accompany someone on a journey that they're used to taking alone. And that's transformational for both the person holding the space and the person who's moving through it. So I hope that this has been helpful. If you have questions or comments, please leave them in my comment section. And if you have ideas for other things in the book or otherwise that you're curious about my input on, please leave them there as well, or contact me via email or another way. And meanwhile, I wish you all the best and send you the blessings of my grandmothers and grandfathers who always walk with me.